So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and launch Unreal Engine 5.4.3. So go ahead and click on launch from the Epic Games launcher to launch Unreal Engine. And once the Unreal Engine project browser is loaded up, we can go ahead and create a new project. So we're going to choose the games template over here. And for the game template that we're going to pick, we're going to pick on the third person games template. And these are my settings. I have it set to blueprint, target platform desktop, quality preset maximum. And we can go ahead and just rename our project. I'm going to go ahead and give this name of the Pirate Game Tutorial for my project. You can name it according to whatever name you want. Then we can go ahead and just click the create button. So that will go ahead and create the project and launch Unreal Engine. And now you can see our project is open up. So if we hit the play button on here, you can see that we have a very simple third-person character template. So this is the character that we're going to modify. So as we hit play, we have a character. We can run around, jump around, and move around using the basic controls, WASD, spacebar to jump. We're going to take that character and modify it to add our own custom character, essentially our pirate character. And we're also going to take some custom animations and create our own animation blueprint so we can see our pirate character animated and walking in our level. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to download the pirate character model. So for that, you'll need to open up the Epic Games launcher and head over to the Marketplace tab. And under the products, you want to search for pirate and filter this by free. So click on max price and filter by free products. And you should see this free pirate character. Go ahead and click on this. And this is the character that comes included. As you can see, it has different types of outfits, as well as a couple of different weapons. All you have to do is click on add to project. And you want to make sure that you click this show all projects button and search for your pirate game tutorial. And now that you see it in here, if you are following this tutorial in a future version of the engine, if you do not see a project here, you want to click on show all projects. And if there's a red message that says the asset is not compatible, you have to click on the little drop down right there and select the most recent compatible version. Once you do that, it should allow you to select your project and you can just click add to project. That will go ahead and download the model and add it to your project like so. So in our content folder, in our content browser, we should have a new folder for Pirate. So if you double click on this, you can see that we have a couple of different folders in here for the character mesh. So we can go to the mesh UV4 and we have full, and as you can see, there's a full pirate mesh character. So there's 3 different variations. We can open up the SK Pirate Full 01. And so this is the character mesh that we're going to be using for the course. As you can see, this character model has quite a bit of detail as well as some cloth simulation on the waist cape right here. But as you can see, we're going to use this model for the duration of our game. So we're going to actually close out of there. And we'll need to go ahead and set this character model in our character blueprint. So first things first, let's go ahead and organize our project files. So we'll need to go to our content folder, and in here we can right click and create a new folder and name this core. This will be our core assets. So we can right click this folder and set a color. Give this folder a color of maybe a red, dark red color, something like that. Just so that stands out to us, because this will be where we store all of our game assets. So in here, we can go into our core folder, and we're going to right click and create a new folder and name this to our blueprints. And this is where we'll store all of our blueprints for our game. Double click and open that up. And we need to go ahead and drag in our character blueprint. So if you go to the third person folder down here, you should have a folder for blueprints, and we should have this third person character blueprint. So this third person character blueprint is the character that we saw in this level when we hit play. This is the character blueprint that controls everything that we see in the level, the character that can run around and jump around and all that. We'll need to take this character and drag it and drop it into the blueprints folder, and we should see the option to move here or copy here. And we actually wanted to just move here, so we'll click move here. That will move it into our core blueprints folder, and that's exactly where we want it. So we're going to keep all of our blueprints and everything organized in this folder. So now that we have that moved into that folder, you can actually double click and open this up. And whenever we open up a new window, we actually want to dock it here at the top. So you can take the window and dock it here at the top so you can switch between the character blueprint and the third person map. Now also I'm going to change a setting in my project. So if you go to edit, and we should have under the editor preferences, I want to change a setting so it'll automatically dock our windows here at the top. So if you go to your editor preferences under the asset editor open location, you can set this from default to main window. And now that you have that set, whenever you open up a new asset like this blueprint, we'll automatically dock it here at the top. So you can switch back between the level and the blueprint. So this is the character blueprint, the BP third person character. So as you can see, we actually have a couple of different tabs in here, but we have the event graph, which has all the logic for the character. Things like the camera input, the movement input, the jump input. So you can navigate in this graph by holding the right mouse button to pan around and scroll in and out to zoom in and out. We have these different tabs here at the top, which we have the viewports, which if you click on the viewport, you can see this is what the character is made of. We have things like the character mesh, the camera, and the capsule collision. So in our case, what we want to do is we want to switch out this character mesh with the pirate character mesh that we downloaded from the Unreal Engine Marketplace. So the way that we can do that is we can select this character mesh, and in the details panel, you're going to see different details about the different components that you have selected. So currently we have the mesh component selected. And since we have that selected, we can see various different details about that mesh, things like the location, the rotation, the scale. But more importantly, we can see the actual mesh asset. So over here, this is the actual asset that is set for our character mesh. As you can see, it's set to this SKM Twin Simple. And if we hit this drop down, we can select what character mesh we want to use other than the current one that we have. So in our case, we want to set the SKM Pirate _full _01, which is that character mesh that we saw earlier. So if we select that, you can see that we now have our character mesh swapped out. It's actually automatically playing the animations that we previously had set up. So to save this and actually test this out, whenever you make any changes inside of a blueprint, you want to come over to this compile button. You want to hit on the compile button. So we'll change from that yellow to a green icon and just click the save. Then we can go back to our third person level and hit play. And now you see that we swapped out our character mesh. And we have our basic pirate character who can actually just run around. We have the jump, everything set up. And you can see that it automatically works because these are using the same skeletons. So the animations will work flawless, as you can see here. Sometimes not all character meshes will automatically work with the default animations. So note that this will not always be the case. So we created our project. We've downloaded a pirate character. We've organized our project assets, and we set the default character mesh to this pirate character. Next up, what we need to do is we need to set up our own custom animations. So currently, if we hit the play, you can see that we set up our simple pirate character, and we're just using the default animations, which is great and all, but what we need is some locomotion as well as a pistol idle animation so that we can hold our little pistol weapon that the pirate character has. And when we strafe left and right, the character will strafe left and right, as well as an aim offset. So depending on where the character is looking, the character will rotate his body, sort of like aiming where the camera is pointed at. So we'll need to go ahead and import some custom animations and set everything up. So if you're watching this tutorial on YouTube, you want to head over to the description of this video to download the project files. But essentially, you should see this pirategame.zip file. Once you have it downloaded, you just right click and extract all. And that will give you the extracted file, which is this pirate game folder, which includes animations, meshes, and a couple of other different things. So what we're interested right now is the animations folder. So double click on the animations. And in our core folder, you want to go back to the core. And in the core folder, you want to right click and create a new folder and name this to animations. And just double click and open this up. And in our animations folder, you can see that we have a couple of different animations. We have the fire and locomotion. So we'll set up the locomotion first. So we need to right click and create a new folder in our animations. Name this locomotion. And just double click and open this up. And in here, we can open up the locomotion. And we have all the following animations. So just drag and select all of these and drag and drop them into your content browser in our locomotion folder. And what you should automatically see is this FBX import options window pop up automatically, which will basically ask us to choose a skeleton or essentially a character to import these animations to. So it's going to ask us to choose a skeleton. So if you click on this none, it'll have the drop down. And we want to look for our pirate skeleton. So down here at the very bottom, it says a UE4 mannequin skeleton. But if you look at the details, you can see that the path is our pirate folder, comes from our pirate folder. So this is the skeleton for our pirate character. So we're going to select this skeleton. Now I'm not going to click on any of the other settings. These are all the settings. I'll leave them as the defaults. But I'll click the import all. Now we'll go ahead and import all of the animations. So now that we're back in our project, you can do a file save all to save all of our animations that we just imported. But now you should see all of the following animations, things like our jog forward, idle, and everything. So we can just open up a idle animation, and you can see we have this character holding sort of like a pistol weapon in their hand. And this is what we'll use for our animations. We also have a couple of different locomotion animations. So you see we have jog forward, jog left, jog right. So we'll use this to set up our directional locomotion. So first up, what we'll need to set up is a blend space, which allows us to blend between one or more animations. So it allows us to take things like our idle animation and blend it with our running forward animation. So in our animations folder, you want to go back out to the animations and right click. We're going to create an animation asset. So you want to head over to the animation asset and we want to select on this blend space right here. So that will create a blend space. Now it's going to ask us to first pick a skeleton. And because we imported all the animations onto that pirate skeleton, we're going to be using this UE4 mannequin skeleton. Again, this is the one associated with our pirate character. So it's important to choose the same skeleton as the one we're using the animations with. So select that, and we'll go ahead and add the asset. So we just need to go ahead and rename this to our blend space underscore locomotion, and just file save all. And we can go ahead and double click and open this up. And so in here, we'll need to set up our basic locomotion. But if this is your first time opening up a blend space asset, essentially all you need to know is that in the center of your screen is the viewport where you can move your mouse cursor around by holding the right mouse button or navigate using the WASD to move. Now on the bottom of the screen, we have this graph, which has two different axes. We have the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. And then on the right, bottom right, we have this asset browser, which shows us all of the animations associated with this character. So you can see we have things like our idle animation, jog forward, and much more. Now over here on the left, we have the asset details, which allows us to set things like our axis settings and much more other different settings. So what we'll need to set up is our graph down here. So to modify our graph, we'll need to go to the axis settings over here and first expand this horizontal axis. So under the horizontal axis, we'll need to give this a name. So under the name, we can select this and name this to direction, because this will be the direction of where the character is moving. And then once we've named that horizontal axis, you'll see down here on the bottom, we'll rename it. We want to give the horizontal axis a minimum and maximum value. So for this minimum value, we'll change this to -180. And for the maximum value, we'll change this to +180. So if we save that, you can see now in the bottom on the horizontal axis, we have our center, which is a value of 0, and we have our minimum value, which is -180. And over here on the right, the maximum value, which is +180. Now, lastly, we'll need to change the grid divisions. So we want to change this from 4 to 8. And then we'll add more grid divisions to drag and drop our animations onto. Now we'll also need to set this to wrap input, and that will be all the settings that we'll need to set for our horizontal axis. Next up, we need to set the vertical axis, so expand the vertical axis. Let's scroll down, and for the name, we'll rename this to speed. So this will be the speed or how fast the character is moving. The minimum value will be 0, and the maximum value we'll set to 600. As for the grid divisions, we'll leave that as 4. And then lastly, we'll just click wrap input. So now that we set up our vertical axis, you can see our vertical axis down here on the graph is renamed. The speed has a default value, a minimum value of 0, and a maximum value of 600. So essentially, the blend space will blend between the speed and direction. It will pick, based on the character's speed and direction, what animation to play. So now in our asset browser, we can start taking different animations and dragging and dropping it onto our grid to start blending between different animations. So that's exactly what the blend space allows you to do. It allows you to blend between one or more animations that you drag and drop onto your graph. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our idle animation. So we have this idle animation. We can drag and drop it on the graph. What you see happens is it adds this little animation asset, which is this dot. If I select on it, I actually want to click on this show sample names. So you can see that this is our idle animation. Now, if you drag it anywhere on the graph, you can see that it doesn't snap anywhere on the grid. You can drag it anywhere you want. But I want to actually hold down the shift key. And if you hold down shift and drag this, you can see that it actually snaps to the grid. So we want to snap it here at the bottom at the value 0 and 0. You want to actually drag this multiple times. So drag, hold down shift and click, and that will snap it, and you can drag it on the bottom here as well. So we want to drag and drop this idle animation for each grid division down here at 0, 0. So we want to drag it all the way down here, and just for each grid division, you want to add an idle animation down here. So we should have all 8 idle animations down here at the bottom. Then what we want to do is we want to search or look for our jog forward. So we should have this jog forward, and we can shift and drag that and drop it on the graph. And we're going to drop it here in the center. So if you select it, it should be direction value 0 and speed value 300. And now what we should be able to do is if you hold down Control, you can see that we can move this little green cursor. If we hold Control and let it go. If I put the control right up here on the jog forward, you can see that the character is playing the jog forward animation. If I move it all the way down to idle, you can see it's playing the idle animation. So all that the blend space is doing is it's blending between the two different animations, the idle and the jog forward animation. So depending on the character's speed, if the speed is 0 and the direction is 0, we'll be playing the idle. If the speed increases to 300, you can see that we're playing this jog forward animation. So essentially, the blend spaces will just blend between those two different animations. Now we're going to add multiple different animations so that if the character direction is in the negative values or in the positive values, we'll play our jog left or jog right animation. So we're sort of adding this locomotion to our character. So what we'll need to add next is we need to add our jog forward circle left. So we have this jog forward circle left. So if you shift and drag that, we can drop it on the grid. And we want to snap it right here to the left of our jog forward. We should have this jog forward circle left. If you hold down Control, you can preview that animation and see exactly what it looks like and how it will blend between the jog forward and the jog circle left. Now, on the other side, we want to take the jog forward circle right, shift and drag and drop it on the grid directly to the right of our jog forward animation. So it should be an exact mirror of the jog circle left. Now we want to take our jog left and drag and drop it on the left grid division. So we should have our jog forward circle left and then our jog left. And then on the right, we want to take our jog right and drag and drop it on the adjacent side. So now we can take our green cursor, hit Control, and you can preview how the blending of the locomotion will look like. Then lastly, we have these jog backward. So we have jog backward circle left and jog backward circle right. So again, you want to take the jog backward circle left, shift and drag it on the grid right here to the left. Then take the jog backwards circle right and drag and drop it to the right on the right side. So now you can see what it looks like. And lastly, we want to take this jog backward. So this is the last animation that we need. We can drag and drop it, put it on each adjacent side. So we should have jog backward, jog backward. So now you should see we have the full locomotion set up. So you want to make sure that you have all the matching animations. So you can pause the video and make sure that you have all the exact animations that you see here on the screen. They match up exactly to what I have set up here. So one last thing that we want to do in here is we need to add some smoothing so that the transition between our jog forward and our idle and the left right has some smoothing between playing the following animations. The way that we'll do that is in our asset details, we can scroll all the way down until you see this sample smoothing section. And under the waste speed, we're going to increase this value to 10. And you want to make sure that you check smoothing and check allow mesh space blending. So just hit those checkbox there and click save. And that will just ensure that the animations will blend smoothly, or there won't be a snapping transition between blending between two different animations. So now we can go ahead and close out of there. We set up our blend space locomotion. Now what we need to do is we need to create an animation blueprint, which will bind the blend space with our character blueprint. So you can think of an animation blueprint as sort of the bridge between the animation blend space and the character blueprint. That's why it's called a animation blueprint. So to create this animation blueprint, we'll need to right click and create a new animation asset. So go to the animation asset tab and we want to select the animation blueprint asset. So select that. And just like we did with the blend space, it's going to ask us to select a default skeleton for this animation blueprint. So in our case, again, we want to select the same skeleton that we're using for this course, which is this pirate skeleton or the UE4 mannequin skeleton. So select that and click create. And we can go ahead and rename this asset to our animation blueprint or ABP _ pirate and do a file save all. We can go ahead and double click and open this ABP or animation blueprint. And again, if this is your first time using an animation blueprint, very quickly, I'll explain the user interface. So over here on the top left, you can see that we have this little viewport. Again, you can scroll in and out and look around, preview your character's animations. Over here in the center, we have this anim graph that you can zoom out in and out and use your right mouse button to pan around. And we have down here on the bottom right, an asset browser where we can drag and drop different animations. And we have these two different tabs, the anim graph and an event graph. So those are all the basics that you really need to know about. So in our anim graph, what we need to do is we need to add a new state. So off of this result, we want to drag and drop it on the graph. And under the search, we want to type in state machine. So under the animation state machine, we want to just add a new state machine. So click on the state machine. Now we'll go ahead and add a new state machine like so. And you can see that it's plugged into the result. So now we can double click and open up that state machine. And you can see that it takes us into this graph. So you can go back to the anim graph by clicking the back right there. You can go back into the state machine by double clicking on it like so. So you can see you can go back and navigate back and forth. But in this state machine, we'll need to add a new state. So off of this entry, you can drag it on the graph. You can see it creates this arrow and drop it on the graph. We have a couple different options. In our case, we want to create the new state. So we'll click on this add state. Now for the state, we'll go ahead and rename this to our idle, walk, run state and click enter. And now we can hit compile and save. And that will save our settings. So currently we have our idle, walk, run state. So you can actually double click and open this up. As you can see, it opens up the idle, walk, run state. And again, you can navigate back by clicking on the back and double click to open it back up. But in our case, you can see that we have this output animation pose and this result pin. So what we want to do is we want to drag in, go to our asset browser and search for our blend space locomotion. That blend space that we just created, we want to take it and drag and drop it on the graph. Now we'll add this blend space node, which is essentially our blend space that we created. So what you'll notice is we have two pins. We have a direction and a speed. So these are the two values that control our blend space, determine what animation should be playing. And then we have this out result, which is the animation pose, which we can plug into the result like so. So now if we hit compile and save, what you'll notice is we're now playing the idle animation. So now all that is left to do is we need to bind these two variables, the direction and the speed, to our character blueprint's direction and speed. So essentially, when the character is running, we want to bind the speed, how fast they're running, to the speed variable in the animation blueprint. That way it will tell the blend space, hey, what animation should we be playing? Would we be playing the idle animation if the character is not moving? Or should we be playing the running animation if the character's speed is greater than 0? So the way that we'll bind these variables to our character speed and direction in our character blueprint is we're going to take the direction, and you can drag off here and drop it on the graph. And we have the option to promote this to a variable. So that's exactly what we'll do. So we'll select that. What that does is it adds a new variable, one of the variables of the type float, named direction. So we can click anywhere else on the graph, and now we'll go ahead and add that. We want to do the same exact thing for the speed. So take the speed and drag and drop it on the graph and click promote to variable. And again, double click anywhere on the graph to add that. So now hit compile and save. And now we've successfully added these two variables for direction and speed that are plugged into our blend space locomotion. So now all that is left to do is to bind these two variables to our character's direction and speed. The way that you'll do that in an animation blueprint is on the event graph. So you want to head over to the event graph tab by selecting it up here. That will bring us over to the event graph. So this event graph is very similar to a blueprint graph that we saw in our character. And so in here, we have these two different nodes. You can see that they're currently grayed out, but we want to go ahead and use these nodes to get our character's movement speed and set these direction and speed variables that we have down here. So first things first is we have this try get pawn owner node. So off of this return value, we're going to do a is valid check. We want to use this is valid, the white question mark down here at the bottom. Now we'll add a is valid node. So what the is valid node is doing is it's checking to see if our pawn owner, in our case, if this is our character blueprint, is it valid? Is it currently spawned in the level? Now we want to hook up the execution. So you want to take this execution from our event update animation and plug it into the execution and hit compile. And once you hit compile, you can see that the flow is moving from left to right. So we're currently checking to see if our owner, our character blueprint, is valid. Now, if they are valid, this is valid will get called. If they're not valid, then nothing will happen. In our case, for the is valid, we want to set our speed and direction. So first, let's set our speed. So take our speed variable down here and drag and drop it on the graph, and we can choose the option to set it. So for our is valid, we'll set up our set speed. And we also want to do it for our direction. So get our direction variable and do the set and hook up the execution. So now we just need to set these two variables based on some information that we get from the pawn owner. In our case, the character blueprint. So off of this try get pawn owner, we can drag and drop it on the graph and search for a get velocity. We can get the velocity of our character. And if we select that, it will return a vector. And so we need to convert that vector to a float. So drag off here and drop it on the graph. And we'll use the node vector length. So type in vector length. And we'll use this vector length node. And that will return a float. It's green value right here, which we can plug into our speed. So essentially all we're doing is we're getting the velocity of our character. We're converting that vector to a float. And we're setting our speed variable to that. Hit compile and save. Now we just need to set up the direction. So for our direction, we need to do a little bit more work to set this up. So all we have to do is off the try get pawn owner, drag and drop this on the graph and search for get actor rotation node. So we have the get actor rotation. And then off of the return value, we want to do a calculate direction. So we have this utilities calculate direction. Select that. You can see we have two inputs. We have a velocity and a base rotation. Our rotation is already plugged up. We just need to take our velocity and plug this in for the velocity like so, and that will output the character's direction. So it's calculating the direction and will output the return value, which is a green float value, which we can plug into our set direction variable. So now all we have to do is hit compile and save. We have our simple animation blueprint, getting our character velocity and rotation, and we're setting our speed and direction, which is used in our state machine in our idle walk run state to power our blend space, which will output the animation pose depending on our speed and direction variables. We'll pick the proper animation to play. So now all that is left to do is to set our animation blueprint in our third-person character blueprint. You want to go ahead and go to your core blueprints and open up the BP third-person character and head over to the viewport. You want to select the character mesh, and in the details, under the animation tab, we should see a animation mode, use a animation blueprint. Currently, we have this anim class ABP Quinn C. So we want to change this to our ABP underscore pirate, our animation blueprint pirate. So select that, and it looks like we're getting a weird bug with the character mesh, but you can see the animation is playing. So to fix that little bug, all you have to do is go to your animation blueprint pirate, and in the preview scene settings, we're going to set this to our SK pirate full 01 mesh. You should see it apply it like so. Save that, go back in your third person character, and you want to reset the skeletal mesh. Also set the animation class back to none, and we can set our skeletal mesh to our pirate full SK pirate full 01, and set our animation class to that ABP pirate, and compile save. And what we should see now is the character mesh is not stretched like what we had before. So just ensure that this is the proper character mesh, the SK pirate full 01, and the animation blueprint is our ABP pirate C. And in our animation blueprint, I set the preview mesh to our SK pirate 01. And we should see now that our character mesh isn't stretched and we don't have that weird bug. But as you can see, we have our character playing our animation blueprint, which is holding the pistol. And if we hit play in our level, we can see that we now have our animations playing. So when our character runs, we have our running animation. If I stop running, you can see we're playing our idle animation. Basically, we set up our character with the animations using our animation blend space to blend between our idle and our walk and run. And we also set up our animation blueprint, which takes our character's movement speed and tells us essentially what animation should be playing based on the speed and direction that we're getting from our character blueprint. Now, the next thing that we'll need to work on is we actually need to fix our camera and character settings. So currently, if I go ahead and close my content browser and hit the play button, you can see that our character doesn't strafe left and right. If I move my WASD keys around, I can rotate my character and sort of spin the character. But essentially what we want to do is we want to modify not only the character's movement settings, but also things like our character's camera positioning. Let's go ahead and do that. Open up your content drawer and click Dock and Layout. Now we'll get it back in our layout right here. We want to go to our core blueprints and open up our third-person character blueprint, because we'll need to modify some of the different settings in here. So for the first settings, we want to head over to class defaults. So click on this class defaults button here at the top. And in the details, we can search for our rotation. And so search for rotation. And if we scroll down, we should have this orient rotation and movement. We want to uncheck that option. And then we want to check or use control rotation yaw. So we uncheck the orient rotation and movement, and we check use controller rotation yaw. Compile and save that and hit play. Now you can see that we're strafing left and right or backwards depending on where the character is moving. And if I rotate my camera left and right, you can see that it rotates the character's body. So now we're using our actual locomotion animations. So depending on where the character is moving, you can see that we're playing those different directional animations. We're strafing left or right. and it looks a lot better than what we had before. Now all that we have to do is we want to modify our camera's positioning so that we can have the camera right above the character's shoulder and not directly behind the character. So if we head back over to our third-person character and head over to the viewport, we can go ahead and modify our camera positioning. So currently our camera is attached to our character by this camera boom, which is a spring arm component. So the spring arm component essentially allows us to move or rotate the camera around the character via this arm. So we're going to modify our camera boom or the spring arm settings. So select the camera boom, and in the details we can modify the settings, things like the arm length, so how far away the camera is from the character, as well as different positioning and offset. So in our case, in the details, under the camera, we want to go to the target arm length and change this from 400 down to 300. And that will pull the camera closer to the character. Then we also want to give this an offset, so we can offset the camera location to be more over to the right of the character. So under the offset, we can give this a default value. So I'm going to plug in some values here, and basically I just got these values by testing it out, but you can play around with these values or just copy the ones that I will input. So I'm going to type in 96.8, and then over here I'll type in 62.6, and those are the different values. Then also I'm going to take this camera boom and move it up like so to about the character's chest height right there, and just compile and save that. So those are all the settings. We changed the arm length, the offset, and I moved this camera boom up. And now if we go ahead and hit play and close my content browser, you can see that we moved our camera to be more over the right and not directly on the center of the character. So now you can see that this is what our game will look like. We can strafe our character left and right, and we have our camera set up to be overlooking the character's right shoulder. So next up, what we want to set up is we need to set up an aim offset. So essentially, what you'll notice is when we hit play, currently if I look down or up, the character's body is just standing at this idle pose. It's not rotating the character's body to look directly up, we're looking, or to point the gun directly down, where we're looking down. So essentially, we'll need to add an aim offset so that if I move the player's camera up, the character's body will rotate and orientate to the direction I'm looking. That way we're pointing the gun up in the sky or pointing it down on the ground, depending on where I'm rotating my camera. So that is the purpose of an aim offset. It allows you to rotate the character's body to orientate it depending on where the camera is looking. So to go ahead and add this aim offset, we'll need to add and import some animations. So you should automatically have the project files downloaded from the description, but you want to go to the Pirate Game animations, and we should have a folder for fire. And in that fire folder, we have this folder for aim offset. Just double click and open that up. So we have 4 different animations in here. So in our project, I'm going to take this side by side, and you want to go to your core animations and right click and create a new folder and name this to fire. And then double click, open that up, and right click and create a new folder and name this to aim offset, or just AO for short. Then double click, open that up, and we'll take our following aim offset animations, all 4 of these, and drag and drop them into that folder. Again, we'll pop open with the FBX import options. So all we need to do is select our skeleton that we're using. In our case, we're using the UE4 mannequin skeleton, pirate skeleton. So select that and leave all the settings as default and just click import all. And now that we have all the following animations imported, we can do a file save all. And you can see that we have our aim offset animations imported. Now to make an aim offset, all you need are the 4 following animations. You need a looking down animation, a looking up animation, a center animation, and then a static animation. So if you want to make any sort of aim offset, you'll need the 4 following animations. So you can create this in any 3D application in Blender. You can even create them in the engine using things like Control Rig. But I've already created the following animations. So now that we have these created, we just need to change a couple of different settings. And we need to modify the down, up, and center animations. So essentially what we need to do in these animations is we need to set the static reference pose, which is this pistol static. So first, let's open up the pistol_down and double click open that animation up. And in here, you can see that it's currently playing this animation. So we can pause the animation by clicking here on graph, and that will just pause the animation from playing. But in the asset details, we want to scroll down until you see this additive settings. And so under the additive settings, you want to change this additive anim type from no additive. You want to change that to a mesh space. And that will give us another option to choose our base pose type. We want to change this from skeleton reference pose down to our selected animation scale. So choose selected animation scaled. So we have mesh space and selected animation scaled, and then it will allow us to pick a base pose animation. So in our case, we want to hit this drop down and search for our pistol_static animation, and select that and just save that. So we need to do this in the other two animations, the pistol center and pistol up. So go ahead and close out of this one and open up the pistol center. And again, same exact thing. We want to scroll in the asset details down to the additive settings, change this from no additive to mesh space, and change this to selected animation scaled, and hit the drop down and search for our pistol_static animation. Save that, close out of there. And again, lastly, we open up the pistol_up. In the asset details, we can scroll down under the additive animation type and select mesh space, change this to selected animation scaled, and hit the drop down and search for our pistol_static animation, like so. Save that and close out of there. So now we've done the following changes to our center, down, and up. So now we should be able to create the aim offset animation asset. So to create an aim offset, you want to right click, and under the animation assets, you want to select the aim offset. So select that. Again, with any animation asset that you create, it will ask you to pick a skeleton. So again, we need to pick the UE4 mannequin skeleton, or the same skeleton that we've been using. So go ahead and select that, and we'll need to rename this asset. So we'll go ahead and name this to aim_offset_pistol, just like so. Let's just do a quick file save all, and then let's double click and open up this aim offset. So in here, the aim offset is very similar to our blend space, in which case you have a viewport, you have a grid down here, you have things like the asset details, the horizontal and vertical axis. And of course, you have some animations in this asset browser. So in our case, all that we're going to set up is the vertical axis. You don't need to set up a horizontal axis, just the vertical, since we have our pistol up, center, and down. Now, if you had pistol left or right animations, you could add those in here, but in our case, we're just going to set up the vertical axis. So in the axis settings, we just need to expand the vertical axis. And in here, we're going to give this a name. We'll name this to pitch. For the minimum axis value, we can change this from -90, from 0 to -90. And for the maximum axis value, we'll change this to +90. Now, that is all the settings that we need to do in the vertical axis. Now we can begin dragging and dropping the assets or the animations from our asset browser. So in the asset browser, we can search for our pistol_, and we should have our pistol center, down, and up. So first, let's take our pistol down and drag and drop it. And if you shift drag, we'll be able to snap it to the grid, which is what we want. So snap it to the very bottom. We want to click on the show sample names. You can see that this is the pistol_down. And then we want to take our pistol_center and shift and drag that in the center right here. And lastly, we'll take our pistol_up and drag and drop it on the top right up here. So if you hold down Control, you can preview what the aim offset looks like. So if we hold it on the down position, it will play the down animation, center animation, or the looking up. So you can see it's basically just rotating the character depending on where the player is looking. Now, if they're looking down, it will play just looking down. If they're looking in the center, play the looking center, and looking up, so. We'll save that and close out of there. Now we just need to add that into our animation blueprint. So we created the aim offset asset. We just need to add it in our animation blueprint. Let's go to our animations, and we should find our animation blueprint _ pirate. Just double click and open that up. And in here, we can go to our new state machine by navigating back like so. We have our anim graph, our new state machine, and then our idle walk run state. So in our idle walk run state, currently we have our locomotion, but we want to add in our aim offset for our pistol. So in the asset browser, we have our aim offset _ pistol. You can drag and drop it anywhere on the graph. You can see that it has this aim offset node. Now what we want to do is we want to blend the locomotion with our aim offset so that we can see both of the following nodes playing together. And the way that we'll do that is we're going to blend this locomotion to the bottom half of our character so that our legs will be moving left or right, or strafing left and right. But on the upper half of the body, from the waist up, we want to be playing the aim offset for our pistol. So the way that we'll blend that together is using the layered blend per bone node. So we'll drag off of this animation pin and drop it on the graph and search for the layered blend per bone and select that. What the layered blend per bone does is it takes a base pose and it will blend it with another pose and output the result. So we can take our base pose, will be our locomotion, our blend pose, that will be our aim offset pistol, and now we can hit compile. And currently we need to do a couple of things. First off, we actually need to finish setting up our aim offset for our pistol. So just like we did for our blend space, we need to promote our pitch to a variable so that we can bind that variable to our character's blueprint. So take the pitch and drag and drop it and promote it to a variable and just click anywhere on the graph, and now we'll name it pitch. Compile and save. And lastly, we need to add a base pose. So we need to add a base pose. We want to search for our idle animation and drag and drop that on the graph. You actually want to select this animation, and in the details, scroll down and click on the loop animation. You just want to make sure that this idle is looping. Then you want to take the animation pose and plug that into the base pose and hit compile and save. So now you can see that everything is hooked up. Then the last thing that we want to do is we want to select this layered blend per bone, and we need to specify the settings at which position in the character, which bone should the following two animation nodes blend at. So essentially, where in the character's body should the lower half be played and the upper half be played. So select this layered blend per bone, and in the details, we can set the specific bone. We want to blend the animations together. So under the config layer setup, we can expand this index and add a branch filter. Click on the plus icon to add an element. And in there, we can expand that. That will allow us to specify a bone name and how much blending should occur. So in our case, we want to rename this bone name to spine _ 01. And so this corresponds to the bones in our character. So we're going to blend this at spine 01, meaning that the lower half will be played with the locomotion and the upper half will be played with this aim offset at the spine 01 bone. And we want to add at least a blend depth of 1 or higher. And then lastly, we want to click on this mesh rotation blend. This will be important later on when we have things like our firing animation. But these are all the basic settings that we need set up for our layered blend per bone. We'll compile and save. Now the last thing that we want to do is we're going to set up this pitch variable. We need to bind this variable to our character's camera position. Basically, where the character is looking at, we'll need to use that value to drive our aim offset. So to do that, we need to head back over to the event graph. And this is again where we're binding things like our speed and direction. So we'll just need to set up our pitch. Now for that, we'll need to do a little bit of calculation. So we're going to, off of our try get pawn owner, off the return value, we can drag and drop this on the graph and search for the get base aim rotation node. And that will get us essentially the rotation of our camera or where the player is looking at. We can right click this return value and split the structure, split struct pin. That will give us the X, Y, and Z. Now what we're interested in is just the pitch. which is the Y value. So we're going to take this pitch and drag and drop it on the graph. Check and see if this is greater than or equal to. Check and see if the value is greater than or equal to. And for the value type, we want to type in 180. And that will give us this Boolean. So off this red pin, we can drag and drop it on the graph and add a branch. And that will provide us with a true or false. We just hook up the execution. So for our true, we want to set our pitch. So take our pitch value and drag and drop it on the graph and click set pitch. So hook that up for the true. So for this value, we want to take our pitch and subtract that by a value of 360 and set that for our pitch for the true. Now for the false, we also want to set our pitch. So hook that up like so. And for this value, we just want to plug in the return value to the pitch like so. So compile and save. So all we're doing is we're doing a little check to see if our pitch is greater than or equal to 180. If so, we'll set our pitch value to the pitch minus 360. If not, we're just setting the value like so. So now that we're setting this value, our aim offset will use the pitch and it will rotate our character's body depending on where we're looking. So now we can go ahead and go back to our third-person map. And if we hit play, if I look down, you can see that the character's body rotates down, and it orientates based on where we're looking or where we're aiming. So if I look up, the character's body will rotate up. If I look down, it will rotate down. So that is our basic aim offset. And you see that it also blends between the bottom half of our body, which has the strafing left, right, forward, and backward, as well as our aim offset, which allows us to look up or down depending on where the character's camera is rotated.